So I want you to imagine living in a world where, the most powerful rules that govern your daily life were actually never written by a human being.
Right, like no legislature voted on them at all.
Exactly. They were never debated in a town hall. And honestly, you can't even read them. But you are just subjected to them literally every time you open your phone or, every time you search for a job or buy something online.
It's kind of a terrifying thought when you really sit with it.
It really is. Because we all just walk around assuming the foundations of our society, things like laws and norms and etiquette, are solid. Like steel girders holding up a skyscraper.
Yeah, we like to think the ground beneath us is stable.
Right. But what if those girders are completely invisible?
Hmm.
And worse, what if we have, absolutely no way to measure if they even exist in the first place?
Well, it is deeply unsettling when you start to pull on that thread because, we operate under this very intuitive assumption that human behavior works on a super clean cause and effect loop.
Like rule gets made, people follow rule.
Exactly. A rule is established, people become aware of the rule, and then they alter their behavior to comply with it. And that creates the stable society we see all around us.
Makes total sense on paper.
It does. But the massive explosion of digital data over the last 2 decades has essentially taken a giant sledgehammer to that entire assumption.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to spend our time today pulling on that exact thread.
It's a really important one to pull on.
Today we are doing a deep dive into this monumental piece of research by Vladimir Dyatkov. Specifically, we're looking at a segment on institutional design for the AI age that focuses on literally redefining what an institution actually is.
Yeah, and the methodology there is just fascinating.
It really is. And the research builds up to this incredible physical experiment involving 200 people locked in this minimal white room with a bell and a button.
Which sounds like a psychology thriller movie, honestly.
Totally. But, before we get to the people in the room, we really have to talk about the crisis that put them there in the first place.
Right, the breakdown of the old models.
Yeah, this idea that digital platforms like the Googles and Metas of the world, which, track every single click and scroll we make, they haven't just changed our behavior. They've actually broken the fundamental theories we use to study human society.
To really grasp the magnitude of this theoretical collapse, it helps to rewind just a bit. We need to look at the foundation we've been standing on for, the past few decades.
Okay, take us back. Where does this start?
So if you study sociology or economics or, political science, you are taught the theories of classical institutionalism.
Right, the foundational stuff.
Exactly. These are frameworks built by absolute giants in the field. People like Douglas North, who literally won a Nobel Prize in economics, and W. Richard Scott.
Okay, so heavy hitters.
Huge heavy hitters. And North gave us kind of the defining metaphor of the era. He said that institutions are the rules of the game in a society.
The rules of the game. Okay, so to use like a sports analogy, the NHL rulebook is the institution, and the Boston Bruins are the organization playing the game.
That is the exact distinction he made, yes. And it's a very broad, very appealing metaphor, right?
Yeah, it feels very intuitive.
Under North's framework, an institution is pretty much any humanly devised constraint that shapes human interaction.
So that would cover the formal stuff, right? Like the
Yeah.
U.S. Constitution or the tax code or, I don't know, a written business contract.
Yep, all of the formal rules. But it also covers informal constraints, too.
Like what?
Like the tradition of shaking hands to close a deal, or, the expectation that you take your shoes off when you enter someone's house.
Okay, that all sounds entirely reasonable to me.
Okay.
It maps perfectly onto how we experience everyday life. So, where does the sledgehammer come in?
The sledgehammer hits the second you ask a scientist to go out and physically measure those rules.
Wait, why is that hard?
Because North's metaphor carries this massive, fundamentally untestable assumption. It assumes that actors, so you, me, corporations, actually know the rules, internalize them, and consciously adjust our behavior.
Okay, but we do, don't we?
Well, the problem is that a rule, as North himself admitted, is just a shared mental model. It is what they call a latent construct.
Latent meaning. It's like dark matter.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
It's like we can't see it directly. We just assume it's there because of its gravitational pull on everything else in society.
That is a brilliant analogy, actually. Yes, a shared mental model only exists inside human consciousness. So think about the scientific method here.
Right. You need to be able to measure things.
Exactly. If an institution is a constraint that no one is consciously aware of, or say it's a cultural norm that nobody actually follows anymore, does it still
How do you
exist?
measure the dark matter?
You can't. You end up in this trap where you just notice a stable behavioral outcome out in the real world, and then you kind of work backward, inventing a rule after the fact to explain why people are acting that way.
I'm struggling with this a bit, I have to admit, because some rules aren't dark matter at all.
Give me an example.
Let's take a speed limit sign. It's right there on the side of the highway. It's made of aluminum. It's covered in highly reflective paint, and it literally says 65 miles per hour on it.
Right, a very physical object.
Yeah, I can touch it. I can measure its dimensions. That is a measurable institution, is it not?
Okay, let's dissect that speed limit sign because it is the absolute perfect trap for this kind of thinking.
Okay, dissect away.
The aluminum and the paint, that is not the institution. That is simply an informational signal that someone placed in an environment.
Wait, so what is the institution then?
The institution, the actual societal constraint, is whether or not the cars slow down.
Oh, I see.
Imagine that exact same speed limit sign gets completely overgrown by a heavy thicket of bushes. No one can see it anymore.
Okay, so it's hidden.
Right.
Mm.
And every single driver on that stretch of highway just speeds past it at 80 miles per hour. Does the institution of the 65 mile per hour speed limit actually exist in that physical space?
Well, in a legal textbook, yes, it does.
But in the physical reality of the highway?
No. It has zero gravitational pull on the cars. They're all doing 80.
Exactly. Which exposes the massive circular tautology of classical institutional theory.
Circular tautology, meaning it just loops back on itself?
Yes. The whole theory wants to explain why human behavior is stable. But to do that, it infers the existence of the rule purely from the behavior it is trying to explain.
Okay, give me the step-by-step of how that logic fails.
It goes like this. You ask a sociologist, hey, why is everyone driving 65? They say, well, because of the institution of the speed limit.
Right.
Then you ask, okay, but how do you know that institution exists? And they say, because everyone is driving 65.
Wow. Yeah, it completely resists falsification. You can't prove it wrong.
You really can't. It's totally circular.
It's like saying, you know, the ground is wet because it's raining, and we know it's raining because the ground is wet. You aren't actually proving the mechanism at all. You're just describing the same puddle twice.
That puddle problem is everywhere. And it applies even when we look at wider, more comprehensive theories like W. Richard Scott's framework.
What did Scott say?
Well, Scott realized that simple punishment and formal rules weren't enough to explain all of society. So he said institutions actually have three pillars: regulative, normative, and cultural cognitive.
Okay, let me make sure I have those right. Regulative is the police officer with the radar gun, right?
Yep, the formal enforcement.
And normative is the societal expectation. Like, I don't know, my grandmother glaring at me from the passenger seat if I drive too fast.
Spot on. That's the normative pressure.
And cultural cognitive is what, exactly? Just the deep-seated background assumptions we carry around.
Yes, the things we internalize so deeply that the alternative becomes literally unthinkable to us.
Like driving on the right side of the road here in the U.S.
Exactly. The assumption that you drive on the right isn't just a law you fear breaking. It's a fundamental cognitive baseline. You don't even question it.
Okay, so Scott is right about that. Institutions do operate through those subtle background assumptions.
He was entirely correct. But we run into the exact same brick wall. How on earth do you objectively measure a taken-for-granted assumption?
I mean, you can't put a thermometer in a culture to see how hot the norms are.
You really can't. Even the most prestigious measurement tools we rely on globally, like the worldwide governance indicators, they don't actually measure institutions themselves.
What do they measure then?
They measure the outcomes of policies, or they use surveys to ask citizens about their subjective perceptions of governance.
Which is really just asking people to self-report on the dark matter in their heads.
And self-reporting is notoriously, provably unreliable.
Right.
Now, this philosophical measurement gap, you know, it might have been an acceptable kind of quirky debate for academics sitting around in faculty lounges in the 1990s.
But not anymore.
No. Today, it is a catastrophic structural incompatibility.
Because of the data explosion, right, the internet changed everything.
Because of the digital platforms. We have TikTok, Amazon, Meta, Google.
And they are just normal websites.
They absolutely aren't. They are planetary scale telemetry engines. They are producing billions of highly granular, time-stamped traces of human behavior every single second of the day.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around that volume of data.
It is. Every microscopic pause you make while scrolling past a video, every little hover of your cursor over a buy button, every single time you abandon a shopping cart, it is all logged as physical, objective data.
And classical institutionalism just wasn't built for that.
Not at all. It was built for an era of sparse data relying on nice metaphors. Today, we are trying to map those unobservable, latent theories onto a mountain of massive, objective digital telemetry.
The puzzle pieces just don't fit together anymore.
They really don't.
I mean, you can't use a theory based on invisible shared beliefs to analyze a spreadsheet that contains 3 billion literal physical cursor movements.
It just doesn't work. The platforms aren't just hosting the game anymore either. They are manufacturing the rules in real time, at scale.
And our classical theories have absolutely no conceptual vocabulary to explain what is happening under the hood.
Exactly. We are flying completely blind, theoretically.
Okay, well, let's pop the hood then.
Yeah.
Because the research points out that these old theories aren't just failing in some abstract way. They are physically breaking down under the stress of digital data in very specific ways.
Yes, there are clear fracture points.
We can literally see the fractures.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the first one, which the paper calls algorithmic contamination.
This is a huge one.
This has to do with how A/B testing works on platforms like Meta and Google, right?
Yes. And it is a devastating critique for any theory that assumes human beings operate in a stable, rule-based environment.
Break that down for me.
Think about traditional science. If you want to test how a new rule affects behavior, you use random assignment.
Right, the clinical trial model.
Exactly. You take 100 people, you flip a coin, heads, 50 people see version A, tails, 50 people see version B. Then you just compare the results. It is the absolute gold standard for isolating a cause.
Because you keep everything identical except the one variable you're testing.
But on modern digital platforms, that kind of pure random assignment is largely a myth.
Wait, really? It's not a coin flip?
No, not at all. When a researcher or a government or an advertiser loads two variants of a message into, say, Meta's ad infrastructure, the platform's machine learning algorithms do not act like a blind coin flip.
What do they do instead?
They actively, dynamically filter who sees what, constantly optimizing for whatever metric they've been told to care about, which is usually predicted click-through probability.
Meaning the algorithm is actively profiling you in milliseconds.
Yes, instantly.
It's saying, okay, version A has a blue button, version B has a red button.
Yeah.
Based on this user's 10-year history of clicking things, they like red, give them version B.
Exactly. And it's doing that in a high-dimensional space that is so incredibly complex. Even the engineers who built the algorithm cannot tell you exactly why a specific person was selected to see a specific variant at a specific millisecond.
That is wild. And that completely obliterates traditional measurement.
It totally does. If you are a sociologist trying to study how people react to, say, a new civic notification, you cannot separate the signal, the notification itself, from the filter, the completely opaque algorithm deciding who gets to see it.
It's like trying to study how mice navigate a maze. But the floor of the maze keeps tilting, the walls keep shifting, and the lights keep flickering, all orchestrated by this robotic architect that refuses to explain its motives.
That is the perfect visualization of algorithmic contamination.
Yeah.
The platform is not a neutral, passive piece of paper just broadcasting your text.
It's active.
Yes, it is an active, self-modifying agent participating in the creation of the behavioral outcome. Classical theory assumes the information environment is a stable backdrop.
But on the internet, the backdrop is constantly optimizing itself behind your back.
Exactly. It's never stable.
Which brings us to the second fracture point, and I find this one genuinely profound. It's the concept of algorithmic exclusion.
This one is chilling.
The research highlights a very famous 2018 study regarding advertisements for STEM education. Science, technology, engineering, and math. Can you break down what actually happened there?
Yeah, this case study perfectly illustrates an institution that possesses absolutely no human intent whatsoever.
None at all.
None. In 2018, researchers discovered that women were being systematically excluded from being shown these advertisements for STEM careers on major social media platforms.
Okay, now put your classical institutional theorist hat on for a second.
Okay, hat is on.
If you observe a highly stable, society-wide behavioral pattern where women are systematically excluded from a professional opportunity, what do you naturally look for?
Well, I look for the dark matter. I assume there is a latent rule at play.
Right. You go looking for the villain.
Yeah, I go looking for a sexist hiring manager who sent a memo saying, hey, don't show this ad to women. Or I go looking for a widespread cultural norm that subtly discourages women from entering those fields, and I assume the advertisers just internalize that norm.
You look for human agency.
Always. But in this case, there was no sexist manager.
Wow.
There was no explicit code written by some misogynistic programmer saying, if gender equals female, block ad.
So no human made that choice.
There was no human intent at all. The underlying mechanism had literally nothing to do with gender norms and everything to do with the mathematics of digital ad auctions.
Okay, let's slow down. An ELI 5. That explain it like I'm 5. How does a math equation accidentally create a discriminatory institution?
So when you run an ad on a platform, you aren't just buying a static billboard on the highway. You are entering a real-time, millisecond by millisecond auction for human attention.
Okay, an auction. I'm with you.
The machine learning algorithm is given a budget by the advertiser, and its only goal is to maximize clicks per dollar.
Just raw efficiency.
Right. It is a greedy gradient descent. It just wants the absolute cheapest, most efficient path to get a click.
Okay, so the algorithm wants cheap clicks. Got it.
Now look at the broader consumer economy. Women historically control a highly significant portion of household spending.
All right, they drive a lot of purchasing decisions.
Because of that, advertisers across almost all consumer industries, we're talking retail, beauty, apparel, home goods, they all bid higher to show their ads to female demographics.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The competition for female attention on social media is just incredibly fierce. Therefore, the baseline cost to put any ad in front of a woman is simply more expensive than putting an ad in front of a man.
Oh, wow. So the STEM campaign launches. The algorithm has, say, $50 to spend.
Exactly.
It shows the ad to a few men, and it costs, I don't know, 50 cents a click. Then it shows the ad to a few women, and because Sephora and Target are constantly bidding up the price of that screen space, a click costs $1.20.
That is exactly what happens. And the algorithm, being coldly, mathematically efficient, looks at that math and says, I'm supposed to get the most clicks for this $50. I am wasting money showing this to women. I will now exclusively show this STEM ad to men.
It just cuts them out entirely.
The algorithm cuts women out entirely, just based on budget optimization.
That is absolutely staggering. Let's just sit with the implications of that for a second. We have a highly stable, reproducible behavioral outcome. A completely gender-differentiated information environment.
Very stable.
Functionally, it operates exactly like a classic institution. It shapes action, it constrains opportunity, it is incredibly stable, and it actively reinforces itself. But literally, no one chose it.
No one.
There is no shared mental model. There is no cultural norm driving the mechanism. It's just a bizarre byproduct of ad auction economics.
How can a classical theory that defines an institution as a humanly devised constraint possibly reckon with that?
It can't.
When the most powerful behavioral constraints in the modern world are being generated by mathematical optimization lacking any human intent, the classical definition simply shatters. You can no longer look for the ghost in the machine. You have to actually look at the machine itself.
Which leads right into the third fracture point. The platform as architect.
This is where it all comes together.
Because in the old days, the NHL writes the rule book, the referees enforce it, and the Boston Bruins play the game. There is a very clear separation of powers. But the digital platform collapses all of those roles into a single entity, doesn't it?
It is a complete collapse. The platform generates the informational signals. It acts as the architect of the filters determining how those signals propagate.
Right.
It owns the fiber optic infrastructure recording your physical reactions. And it is the actual governed space itself.
They are everything all at once.
You're the game board, the referee, the rule book, and the players simultaneously. They write the terms of service, they enforce them through opaque algorithmic filtering, they log every micro-interaction, and they dynamically alter the physics of the game board in real time through constant A/B testing.
If the constraints governing your behavior are that fluid, constantly experimentally manipulated, and totally opaque, how can any sociologist pretend they're studying a stable, exogenous rule?
They can't, and that is the ultimate diagnosis of the crisis here. We have a total structural collapse of classical measurement. It's just broken.
The definition of institutions as static rules or shared beliefs is a dead end in a digital context, which forces us to ask the terrifying, but honestly exciting question.
What is the new paradigm?
Exactly. If an institution isn't a rule, What is it?
Okay, this is where the research pivots from tearing down the old house to building the new one.
And it's a very different house.
And to do that, it pulls from Anatole Rappaport's systems theory, specifically a concept called subjectivism.
Right, Rappaport.
I have to admit, when I first read the word subjectivism in a paper that's supposedly trying to turn sociology into a hard empirical science, it felt super contradictory. What does Rappaport actually mean by this?
It definitely sounds like a paradox, but it's actually the key to empirical rigor here. Rappaport argued that in complex systems, patterns, whether it's a weather system, an ecosystem, or a human institution, are not pre-existing magical entities sitting out in the world waiting for a scientist to stumble upon them, like a new species of butterfly.
They aren't just out there waiting to be found. No, they don't have objective boundaries in nature. Instead, they are carved out of the raw data by the analyst.
Okay, stop right there. If an institution is just a pattern, an analyst decides to carve out of a giant spreadsheet, doesn't that make it completely subjective? Aren't we just finding faces in the clouds at that point?
I see why you'd think that.
Aren't we just making up shapes that suit our narrative and calling it science?
Well, that is the danger of bad science, certainly. But Rappaport's subjectivism draws a very, very strict line. The criteria for what constitutes an institution-like, the threshold of what we actually care about, is chosen subjectively by the analyst.
Okay, the threshold is subjective.
But the data itself and the mathematical processes used to carve it must be strictly objective.
Ah, I see the distinction.
Let's look at the new operational definition proposed by the research. It states that institutions must be redefined from static rules to empirically distinguishable, statistically stable clusters of behavioral trajectories.
Let me just chew on that phrase for a second. Statistically stable clusters of behavioral trajectories.
It's a mouthful.
That doesn't sound like sociology anymore. That sounds like particle physics.
And that is entirely the point. We are moving from philosophical interpretation to hard empirical telemetry.
Okay, I like that.
To understand how we actually get to a cluster, we have to walk through the new causal chain this framework proposes. It completely rewires how we think about human action.
Walk us through it.
It goes like this. Signal, filter, stimulus, spectrum, reaction, pattern, stability, institution.
Okay, let's break that chain down link by link. Because if this is the new physics of society, we really need to understand the mechanics. It starts with a signal.
A signal is simply an objective informational event in the environment. It is pure data.
Like what?
An email notification popping up on your screen, a red button on a wall, a physical speed limit sign on the highway.
Okay, the objective thing in the world. Next comes the filter.
The filter is you. It is the individual person's cognitive, cultural, emotional, and situational background.
All the baggage I bring to the table.
Exactly. The signal has to pass through your unique filter. And when it does, it transforms into a stimulus. The stimulus is your subjective internal interpretation of the objective signal.
Okay, so applying that back to the speed limit sign analogy. The signal is the aluminum board painted with the number 65. That is a constant.
Yes, objectively there.
But my filter is that I am currently 10 minutes late for a job interview. I drive a fast sports car, and I happen to know from experience that police rarely patrol this specific 2-mile stretch of road.
Right, that's your unique context.
So the stimulus my brain generates isn't drive 65. The stimulus is drive 75 and keep your eyes peeled for cops.
That is a perfect translation of the concept. Now imagine 100 different drivers on that exact same road. Every single one of them has a slightly different filter.
Right.
Some are anxious teenagers with learner's permits. Some are elderly people who maybe can't see well in the dark. Some are late for work.
Everyone is different.
Because the filters are infinitely varied, one single objective signal will always produce a spectrum of different stimuli, which then results in a spectrum of different physical reactions.
Some break, some accelerate, some ignore it entirely.
Precisely. Multiplicity is baked into the system. You'll literally never have uniform compliance because no two filters are perfectly identical.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay, now we move to the final links in the chain.
Yes, the long-term observation. Over time, as those 100 drivers are repeatedly exposed to the highway and the sign, they develop patterns of reaction.
Like habits.
Right. The teenager consistently drives 60, you consistently drive 75.
And when you zoom out and look at all 100 drivers over, say, a month, you start to see groupings.
Yes. You use mathematical tools like unsupervised learning algorithms or Markov chains to analyze the physical telemetry of the cars. You aren't asking the drivers what they believe at all.
No survey.
No surveys. You are looking at their raw speed data. You notice that 60% of the cars cluster around 70 miles per hour, 20% cluster around 60, 20% cluster around 80.
Okay, I see the clusters forming.
If those groupings stop shifting and maintain stability over time, you have found your institution.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The cluster itself is the institution.
It is.
We aren't hunting for the ghost of the rule anymore. We're just measuring the physical footprints left behind by human action.
You've got it completely. You don't need to ask if anyone believes in the tax code. You just look at the telemetry of tax filings.
Right.
You identify a new tax form. You map the spectrum of reactions, filing on time, filing for an extension, evading it completely. If a cluster of behavior is mathematically stable over time, that cluster is an institution.
It is a breathtaking shift in perspective. But here is the catch.
There's always a catch.
We just established earlier that digital platforms are completely contaminated by algorithmic A/B testing and algorithmic exclusion. The maze is always shifting.
Right, the contamination.
So if this researcher wanted to actually prove that this new causal chain works, that signals pass through filters and naturally form stable behavioral clusters, they couldn't use data from Meta or Google to prove it, right?
No, they absolutely couldn't. The algorithmic interference bias on digital platforms makes it literally impossible to isolate the pure interaction between a human cognitive filter and a static signal.
The algorithm is always in the middle, muddying the waters.
Constantly.
Yeah.
To prove this theory empirically, the researcher had to bypass the digital noise entirely. They had to construct a physical clean room.
Which brings us to the centerpiece of this entire deep dive. The button press experiment.
Yes, the room.
Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a participant. Imagine you are one of 200 university students recruited for this study. You are told it's a study on decision-making in novel environments.
A very vague prompt.
Very vague. You walk into a completely minimal 5-meter by 5-meter room. The walls are stark white. There is a single chair. On the wall, there's a visual sign and a physical button. That's it.
The minimalism is totally the point here. It is stripping away all environmental noise.
The experimenter tells you, you will hear a bell 3 times. Each time you hear the bell, a round begins. You may do whatever you feel comfortable doing. There is no right or wrong answer.
And then they leave.
The experimenter physically leaves the room. You are completely alone. A bell rings. The clock starts ticking for a 60-second round. What do?
It's a brilliant, almost theatrical setup.
It really is.
By placing the experiment in a physical space with no experimenter present, the researcher successfully eliminates the algorithmic architect.
No more machine learning.
Right. There is no machine learning model secretly deciding who sees the button based on some hidden bidding war. Every single participant is exposed to the exact same physical informational signal. It is pure, unadulterated human telemetry.
It reminds me of one of those quirky indie video games, like the Stanley Parable or a psychological escape room.
Yes, exactly that vibe.
The goal is to translate an abstract informational signal, the sign on the wall, into a highly observable physical reaction, pressing the button, or choosing not to.
And crucially, they want to see if a behavioral spectrum naturally emerges and stabilizes without ever using a subjective survey to ask people what they were thinking.
They just want the physical data.
They are purely measuring the physical footprints. To test the robustness of this new theory, the researchers split the 200 students into 4 distinct conditions, 4 different rooms, with 50 people in each.
Okay, so 4 variations.
They manipulated the signal encoding, they introduced monetary motivation, and they drastically altered the complexity of the environment.
And they didn't just measure if someone pressed the button, right? They measured how long it took them to press it. Why is reaction time so critical here?
Reaction time serves as a proxy measurement for that invisible cognitive filter we talked about.
So?
If you press the button in 2 seconds, your filter processed the signal effortlessly. But if you pace around the room for 30 seconds before pressing it, your filter experienced massive friction trying to decode the stimulus.
So it's a way to measure the brain working.
Exactly. It allows us to mathematically map cognitive load.
All right, let's walk through the 4 rooms, because the data that comes out of this clean room is just wild. We start with condition 1, the standard room.
This is the baseline room. You walk into the white room. There is a single red button on the wall. Underneath it is a sign printed in the participant's native language, which is English here. It simply says, "Press me."
And then the bell rings.
The bell rings.
In round 1, 86% of the participants pressed the button. 14% abstained. They just sat in the chair or stood there for the full 60 seconds.
Which is interesting in itself.
Yeah, because afterward, in the debriefing, the abstainer said things like, I didn't know if it was a trick, or I didn't know if I was allowed to touch the equipment.
This is a really critical initial finding. Even with the clearest, most unambiguous signal imaginable, a bright red button natively commanding you to press it in a completely barren room, you do not get 100% uniform compliance on the first exposure.
Multiplicity is the default state of human behavior.
Exactly. The filters are always varying, even when the signal is perfect.
But the adaptation is incredibly fast. By round 2, the compliance rate jumped from 86% to 96%, and then in round 3, it stayed exactly at 96%.
That plateau is exactly what we are looking for. The researchers used a statistical metric called total variation distance, or TVD, to measure how much the overall distribution of behavior shifted between rounds.
Can you give me an ELI 5 on total variations distance? What is that?
Sure. Think of it like taking 2 photographs of a crowded town square taken 1 minute apart.
Okay, 2 photos.
If you overlay the photographs, the TVD measures how many people moved to a different spot.
Yeah.
If a lot of people moved, the TVD is high, the system is volatile.
Right.
But if the TVD drops to 0, it means the crowd is completely frozen. Everyone stayed in their exact spot.
So between round 2 and round 3 in the standard room, the TVD dropped to exactly 0. The crowd froze.
Yes. The institution locked in immediately, and the reaction time reflects how easy it was. An average of 5.2 seconds from the bell to the button press.
Wow, that's fast.
The filter processing cost was virtually non-existent. You read the sign, the stimulus aligned perfectly with the signal, and you acted. A highly stable, single-dominant cluster institution formed almost instantly.
But that is the easy room.
Right, that's the baseline. Let's step into condition 2, the foreign room.
This is where the friction really begins. Same minimal white room. But the button is white now, not red.
Right.
And the sign underneath it is printed in a completely invented alien script. It looks like a complex logographic language, maybe like ancient Sumerian or an alien dialect from a sci-fi movie, but it means absolutely nothing. It is unreadable. The bell rings. Now what?
The system immediately fractures. In round 1, compliance plummeted to just 46%. 54% abstained.
And the reaction time?
It skyrocketed from 5.2 seconds to a massive 18.4 seconds.
And wow. Imagine standing in a silent white room for almost 20 seconds, just staring at a wall. You can picture the participants pacing the room, squinting at the sign, looking at the back of the sign, trying to decode a signal that is fundamentally encrypted.
The cognitive filter is absolutely redlining, trying to process the stimulus. And as the rounds progressed, the behavior kept shifting.
It didn't settle down.
Not quickly. By round 2, compliance rose to 54%. By round 3, it hit 66%. The cluster was not stable yet. The TVD between round 2 and 3 was 1.2, which is well above the threshold for mathematical stability.
So they hadn't reached an equilibrium.
No. But the most profound insight from condition 2 comes from the introduction of a sociological concept called anomie.
Anomie. A-N-O-M-I-E. What is that measuring?
So anomie is basically measuring the gap between the normative expectation and the behavioral reality.
Like saying one thing and doing another.
Close. It is the friction between what people think the rule is and what they actually do. So, after the experiment, the researchers asked the participants in the foreign room, what do you think the experimenters expected you to do in there?
And what did they say?
Exactly. 50% believed they were expected to press the button.
But wait. 66% of them actually pressed it in round 3.
Exactly. That 16% difference is a behavioral surplus. You have more people physically pressing the button than actually believe the button is supposed to be pressed.
Why would someone press it if they didn't think it was the rule?
Out of sheer curiosity, or out of boredom, or just out of a habit of interacting with touch interfaces.
So they just poked it to see what would happen.
Basically. The physical data proves that people were acting based on impulses that completely overrode their normative uncertainty.
What?
Classical theory assumes people follow rules because of a shared belief in the rule. The anomie measurement in this room physically proves that the informational layer, what we think the rule is, and the behavioral layer, what we actually do, can operate completely independently of one another.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
The dark matter of their belief didn't match the physical telemetry of their hands.
Not at all.
Which brings us to condition 3, the incentivized room. This room is just brutal in its efficiency.
Right.
It's the exact same setup as the foreign room white button, unreadable alien script.
Right.
But before the participant walks in, the researcher casually mentions, by the way, you will receive $10 for each round in which you press the button inside the room.
The results here are stark and honestly incredibly important for understanding behavioral economics.
What happened?
100% compliance across all 3 rounds.
Well,
Every single person pressed it, every single time. The wide behavioral spectrum of the foreign room completely collapsed into a single, massive spike of compliance.
and the reaction time.
2.1 seconds.
Wait, they were hitting it twice as fast as the people who could natively read the English sign in room 1.
Yes, this demonstrates the overwhelming power of a motivational overlay. The $10 incentive didn't just tip the scales of irrational choice. It fundamentally short-circuited the cognitive filter entirely.
So the alien text didn't even matter anymore.
The encrypted alien sign on the wall became completely irrelevant. They didn't pause for 18 seconds to deliberate over what the symbol meant. The motivational signal completely overrode the informational environment.
It just bypassed the cognitive decoding process entirely.
Totally. The institution of universal compliance was mathematically stationary from the very first millisecond.
Motivation acts like a cognitive skeleton key. It just unlocks the door and ignores the puzzle completely.
It really does.
But if the incentivized room is about efficiency, condition 4 is about absolute chaos. The complex room, or what the paper calls the high entropy field, this is the room that fundamentally broke my brain.
It is the ultimate test of the theory. Set the scene for us.
You walk into the white room, but instead of one button on the wall, there is a massive panel covering the entire space. 30 different buttons.
Just a wall of buttons.
A wall. They are different shapes. Squares, circles, triangles. They are different colors. Red, blue, green, yellow. Each button has its own sign underneath it.
And the text.
29 of the signs are printed in real foreign languages, like Arabic, Mandarin, Cyrillic, or completely fake alien scripts. And hidden randomly, somewhere in that chaotic matrix of 30 buttons, is a single button with a native English press me sign from condition 1.
Just one.
Just one. The bell rings. You have 60 seconds.
It is an engineered environment of extreme cognitive overload.
What did the data look like?
In round 1, the behavioral spectrum completely shatters. Only 14% of the participants managed to find and press the target English button.
So almost no one found it.
Right. 60% abstained entirely. They were completely paralyzed by the noise. And crucially, 26% engaged in an entirely new behavioral cluster that the paper categorizes as exploratory pressing.
Exploratory pressing, meaning they just started mashing buttons.
Yes. They pushed the alien buttons, the Arabic buttons, they pushed multiple buttons at the same time. They abandoned the search for the correct signal and just started interacting with the noise.
Wow. And what about by round 3?
By round 3, the chaos had shifted, but it was nowhere near stable. Compliance with the target English button rose to 46%.
Okay, so some figured it out.
Yeah, but exploratory pressing jumped significantly to 38%. Abstention fell to 16%. And the reaction time was agonizingly slow, 27.9 seconds on average.
Half a minute just to decide what to do.
Exactly. The TVD, the total variation distance between rounds, was massive, indicating that the institutional formation was highly volatile and actively bubbling.
But I have to stop and ask the obvious question here. Why didn't people just ignore the noise?
What do you mean?
The target signal, the English press me button, was exactly the same physical object as it was in condition 1. It was right there on the wall. Why did adding 29 fake buttons make nearly 40% of the people press the wrong buttons?
Because environmental complexity doesn't just camouflage the signal, it actively generates entirely new, stable, alternative institutions.
How?
Think about your cognitive filter. When the information field becomes that dense, your brain's task fundamentally shifts. You are no longer doing a simple decode and execute operation.
Right, it's too much to decode.
You are forced into a scan, evaluate, compare, discard, and guess loop.
Well,
The cognitive resources required to filter that much high-entropy noise are overwhelming. So human beings adapt by adopting alternative strategies to relieve the cognitive pressure.
they seek the path of least resistance.
Precisely. Some people engage in what economists call satisficing. They just hit the first button that looks even remotely colorful or interesting just to do something.
It's just to end the tension.
Yes.
Right.
And some people rebel against the overwhelming choice and just press everything in a chaotic sweep. The noise itself becomes the architect of the behavioral spectrum. The complexity is the constraint.
The research even tracked their eye movements, didn't it? They noted a negative correlation between reaction time and the participant's visual scanning path.
Yes, which is a beautiful piece of empirical data. If a participant's eyes happen to land on the target English button early in their random visual sweep of the wall, their reaction time was incredibly fast, mirroring condition 1 perfectly.
Right, because they found it fast.
But if their eyes wandered over the foreign signs first, their cognitive filter got bogged down processing the fake scripts, they experienced cognitive fatigue, and they took much longer to press anything, or they simply gave up and abstained.
So it's just luck of the draw.
The purely random order of stimulus exposure dictated the final institutional outcome.
The physical layout of the noise literally rewrites the rules of the room.
It does.
If you synthesize all of this, the 4 rooms, the reaction times, the TVD, the ultimate proof of the experiment is profound.
Oh.
It physically, mathematically proves that an institution is not the prescriptive text on a sign.
It proves that the institution is the stabilized statistical distribution of the physical button presses.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. No signal, not even a massive red button in your native language, produces uniform compliance in a population. Multiplicity is a feature of human biology, not a bug.
And complexity makes it worse.
And most importantly, it proves that a complex environment guarantees a fractured, highly volatile institutional landscape where people will literally invent new behaviors just to cope with the noise.
So let's take this massive theoretical breakthrough projected out of the stark white room and map it back onto the messy digital world you and I navigate every single day.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about cookie consent banners. You know exactly the ones I'm talking about. You click a link to read a recipe or a news article, and before you can see the text, a massive screen-filling matrix of toggles pops up.
Oh, I hate those.
We all do. They talk about legitimate interest, vendor preferences, strictly necessary cookies. It is just a wall of legal jargon.
Those cookie banners are not just bad user interface design. They are the deliberate weaponization of Condition 4.
Unpack that connection for us.
Yeah.
How is a cookie banner the 30-button room?
The corporate website designers, acting as the platform as architect we talked about, they know exactly what they are doing.
They do.
Absolutely. If they gave you a simple Condition 1 room, just 2 clear buttons in plain English saying track me and don't track me, compliance with the tracking would plummet. The TVD would stabilize instantly into a cluster of mass privacy protection.
Because everyone would just click don't track me.
Exactly, and the platform doesn't want that. So they intentionally inject high entropy into the information field.
They build 29 fake buttons. They create the matrix of toggles.
Exactly. They purposefully create environmental complexity, knowing full well that it will delay your reaction time, overwhelm your cognitive filter with legal jargon, and dramatically widen the behavioral spectrum.
They are mathematically calculating your cognitive fatigue.
They know that if they present you with enough noise, your brain will switch from decode and execute to satisfice and escape.
Just to make it go away.
Right. They force a specific behavioral outcome, which is you getting frustrated, giving up, and just clicking the giant, brightly colored accept all button at the bottom of the screen to make the noise stop.
They are engineering an institution of compliance, not through a formal rule, but through environmental friction. They are literally using noise as a behavioral cage.
And this exact same mechanism applies to every major platform update. When a social media app radically changes its user interface, like moving the buttons around, changing the way the feed scrolls, altering the notification icons, they aren't just giving the app a fresh coat of paint.
What are they doing?
They are literally re-engineering the institutional norms of their entire user base. They're altering the signals and the high entropy field those signals propagate in, forcing billions of cognitive filters to recalibrate simultaneously.
It gives you a chilling, but deeply empowering new lens to view the digital world. Every single interface you interact with is a signal. You and your limited cognitive bandwidth are the filter.
And those massive analytics dashboards inside these tech companies, they aren't just measuring engagement metrics for advertisers. They are the living, breathing readouts of human institutions forming, fracturing, and dissolving in real time.
And this is exactly why Dajkov's redefinition is so utterly crucial for the future of society, particularly for regulators and policymakers.
It changes the entire game for regulation.
Right now, governments around the world are trying to figure out how to regulate AI and social media monopolies. But they are failing because they are asking normative, unmeasurable questions.
They really are.
They drag a tech CEO into a congressional hearing and ask, is your algorithm fair? Or does your platform violate democratic norms? And they get completely bogged down in these philosophical dark matter debates that go absolutely nowhere.
Because Congress is using W. Richard Scott's latent vocabulary from the 1990s to fight a multi-armed bandit machine learning algorithm in 2026.
It is a totally asymmetrical battle.
It is.
But under this new framework, regulators can stop acting like philosophers and start acting like physicists. They can demand hard empirical accountability.
Yes.
Instead of asking, is this fair? They can demand the telemetry. They can say, show us the data. What specific stable behavioral clusters has this new interface stabilized?
What is the anomie gap between your stated terms of service and the actual physical behavioral spectrum of your users?
Exactly. You can literally measure the total variation distance of a platform's user base before and after an algorithmic update.
You can prove it mathematically.
Right. If the TBD spikes and reorganizes into a cluster that favors the platform at the expense of user choice, you have empirical mathematical proof that they manipulated an institution.
It turns the subjective sociology of the internet into the hard physics of behavioral telemetry. We are no longer helpless to the opaque whims of the algorithm, so long as we are willing to upgrade our measurement tools to match the reality of the data.
We've gone on quite a profound journey today. We started with classical theories of rules and constraints that felt intuitive, but were ultimately completely unmeasurable.
The dark matter.
We looked at how the digital platform explosion shattered those theories through algorithmic exclusion and A/B testing interference. And we walked into a stark, minimal white room with a bell, which definitively proved that institutions are not human rules at all.
No, they are statistically stable clusters of observable behavior reacting to informational signals.
It is a total paradigm shift in how we understand our own actions in a digital society.
It really is.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought that builds on everything we've unpacked today. A thought experiment for the near future.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've established that institutions are no longer defined by shared human beliefs, but by mathematically stable clusters of behavior in response to signals.
Right.
Right now, major tech companies are rapidly integrating autonomous AI agents into the web. These agents are being designed to browse the internet, click on buttons, filter noise, and make purchasing decisions on our behalf.
Oh, wow.
So, what happens when these AI agents become the primary actors navigating these high-entropy information fields?
That is a staggering implication to consider. If the filter interacting with the signal is no longer a fatigued human brain, but a tireless, large language model.
Will thousands of autonomous AI agents interacting with platform algorithms at millisecond speeds naturally form their own behavioral clusters? Are we about to witness the birth of the very first purely non-human institutions?
It's entirely possible.
And if an institution forms between two algorithms in a digital void, will we even be able to recognize it, let alone govern it?
The institutions of tomorrow might be completely alien to us, even as they dictate the architecture of our daily lives.
It is something to keep front of mind the next time you are confronted with a wall of 30 buttons on a cookie banner, or you wonder why an algorithm chose to show you a specific ad. Keep questioning the signals around you. Keep a close eye on the friction in your own cognitive filters, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.